Good morning, everybody, or actually it's good afternoon because it's Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm Kathy Hester, and today we're going to talk about making tempeh, and I think I have some ideas to make it foolproof for you, or at least as close to foolproof for something fermented as possible. Oh, yay! I see you guys. So, Marilyn is from Louisiana, and she said she's under an air quality alert to the Sahara dust. It looks foggy outside. That's so weird. It's very sunny and happy outside of my window. And Brenda says, good morning from Eastern Washington. And Joanne is here from Southwest Florida. So today, because of the nature of this class, we're going to go back and forth between me being live and us watching some pre-recorded stuff together. So when we switch to that, I'm still going to be a live little circle in the corner. So I can stop the video at any point so I can answer questions or explain things more. And we'll just see how it works out. I've tested it all. It all seems like it's going to work. Fingers crossed. And CDMA, are you Cindy by any chance? From good afternoon. It is Cindy. Sorry. Cindy from Missouri. So I'm so happy to have you guys here. And I know some people are feeling like, oh, tempeh, that sounds like a lot of work. And there is some work. There's more work involved in making soy tempeh than black bean tempeh. So in this class, I'm going to show you start to finish black bean tempeh, and we're going to do a soy tempeh. Now, soy tempeh does require more work, and you may choose not to make soy tempeh, but that doesn't mean you can't make other kinds of tempeh, okay? So that's one of the things that I want you to be real clear on. So the things you need for this class, so the most important thing you're going to need, and I'll let you see it from overhead, I think it's is a tempeh starter. So there's a new packaging from Cultures of Health, and you get about a tablespoon, so about a teaspoon. So a pound of beans, this would make into tempeh, okay? Excuse me. This is a tempeh starter. I believe it was from Indonesia that I ordered off of Etsy. You can also get some off of Amazon. You can get this off of Amazon. I was able to get free shipping and get this from the Cultures of Health website right now. So the thing that you absolutely have to have is tempeh starter, right? So you can't really take just a piece of store-bought tempeh and then make this like you can with yogurt. So that's the one thing you have to purchase. So I got some non-GMO soybeans, and you want to make sure they're not old soybeans. So if you have some that you saved for a while, like perhaps I have, you want to try and use the fresher ones for this, and it's just going to be easier. I also, and this is crazy talk, right? You can use canned beans. So if you have some canned beans, and you can use canned beans that are not black beans, that we're going to talk through that whole process. I'll give you some clues about some other beans. And over there I have some other beans that we're not doing today that are culturing that I'm going to show you as well. The other thing you're going to need is a kind of vinegar. Some people say apple cider vinegar doesn't work. I've been using it this whole time, and everything's been testing really well. You could use a rice vinegar. You could also use like a white vinegar. I would not use a balsamic, especially not like a flavored balsamic, because it's been boiled down. And also the reason we're using the vinegar is to sanitize things and to make sure, since we're culturing something, we don't want all the bad things to culture as well. And let's see, here we go. Oh, and Joanne says there's a great starter from Belgium. And Joanne, I would like that information. So please, if you don't put it here, email it to me and I'll put it in the class, because I'll order some and give it a try too. Because I've been making all the tempeh. all the tempeh. So these are the ingredients that you need to have. And you don't even have to have both soybeans and canned black beans. If you've never made tempeh before, I'm going to encourage you to go ahead and get 2 cans of beans. And the reason for that is the beans need to be al dente. So not so al dente that they're going to hurt your stomach, but also, you know, the cultures it a little bit extra too. But if the beans are too wet or mushy, your culture can't take. It's not going to grow all that white fluffy goodness. And so I'm also, next I'm going to show you, and we're going to cook up some black beans. And these are super fresh black beans, so I'm a little nervous that they're going to get too mushy. But if they do, at least I can show you what too mushy is. So we'll go from there. And so after we start this, then I'm going to cut to a video that shows you start to finish with the cans of black beans, the soybeans. So I'm going to move some of this stuff out of the way. I'm going to take this over here because if the black beans are good and happy, then I'll show you the processes to getting them at least into the bag. So we'll do that little by little. I don't really have a good place for these. Here we go. So one of the things about cooking the beans al dente, and actually one of my starters had a leak in it, and that makes me unhappy because I'm wasting it. Something cool too is, so like if you get Culture for Health starter, it gives you this little pamphlet that talks about troubleshooting and massaging the beans and some things like that, and some little checklists. So it can be very handy, and I'll let you see that too. And I bet you could probably download this off the site as well. So it gives you some step-by-steps on how to do this. So I found, for me personally, my failures have been more from overcooked beans than anything. And so there's a great book, and I've got this in your materials I sent you, which is Miso Tempeh Natto by Kristen and Christopher Shockley. And I'll let you see that this way too. Nope. There we go. And this book is awesome. So I really feel like I've learned most of the information that I needed from this book. I've been checking in some other sources and experimenting as well, but they talk about steaming the beans in the Instant Pot. And what that's kind of looking like is there's a cup of water in the bottom. This is that OXO steamer. These beans have been soaked overnight, okay? So we're going to steam them. And it seems like they wouldn't get ready, but they will. Now, I have also found that with the Milthy and the steaming, because I hadn't really steamed in the Milthy before, so in the Instant Pot, when you steam, just like pressure cooking, you have to have water come up. Actually, it will cause the pressure to go up as well. But it gets hotter. It just does a little bit different. So what we're going to do on the Milthy 2.0, if I don't say just release the pressure naturally, it tries to release the pressure during the steaming process, which is disconcerting. And actually, let me bring the phone over and I'll show you this view. Let's see if I can get this ready to go and get it up a little bit. Don't you love all the new techie wackiness that I'm bringing to our classes? I hope you do. Sometimes it stresses me out a little bit, but you know, a little stress is good for you. Okay, so I'm going to select the steam, right? And I'm going to steam these for 7 minutes. I want them to be just a little bit under. And because I'm on the Milthy 2.0, the pressure release is on auto. I don't want it to be on quick. I want it to be on natural. So that's what I'm talking about as far as that goes. It seems to be a quirk in Milty 2.0. I've not tried steaming in the old Milty yet. So if I do, then I'll come back and let you know about that too. So Brenda says my techie awesomeness is, well, just awesome. Thank you. It always makes me so nervous when I'm trying something new. And so I spent this morning like trying the videos back and forth and testing some things. So hopefully everything goes super smooth. Oh, hi Diane. I'm so glad you're here today. So we're just going to put this to the side and it's going to do its cooking thing, and then we'll come back to it in a little bit. So we've done the first thing, which is to talk about the ingredients that you need. Let's go another step and let's talk about how we're going to culture it, because we want to keep it like between like 88 and 91 degrees. And that seems really precise. So I will also say in my first book that I did Tempeh, which is the gluten-free vegan cooking in your Instant Pot, I have an update about that too. So there were 2 reasons all of my batches of tempeh didn't do amazing, and now I could make an amazing batch of tempeh every time. I feel pretty confident as long as the starter works. And that's going to be part of your variable that you're not going to be able to control. And so Cultures for Health has always worked for me. So I will say that. Joanne says, I love the stress we put you through, but what a learning experience. Yay. I don't mind going through the stress as long as you guys get the information you need. And I think one of the things I'm excited about doing this class, because if this works out well and you guys like it, then we can make tofu. We could do the dehydrator class. We can do other classes that take multiple days. And that's really exciting to me, to do something a little bit different. Okay, so back to how do we keep it at that temperature? And Joanne feels like her garage is a good place because it stays about that temperature. An easy way is a dehydrator. And even the cheapy dehydrator I have has the numbers on it, right? Now, I will say I've been using my not cheap Breville Oven Air because it has a dehydrator function. And right now I have the fan off just because I'm taping. This is what it's usually like. And so I don't know if you guys can hear that roar at all, but it actually doesn't seem as loud right now. I'm not trusting that. So, well, oh, that's why. It didn't actually come all the way on. Or wait, is there more than one? Oh my gosh, you guys, I just found something new right here in prime time. My life could be saved. There are 2 fan speeds on there. I didn't realize that the other day. There's convection and super convection. Okay, so this video is happening during, what is it, month whatever of the new normal. So my nerves are very frayed. And so having the loud convection was really bothering me, the large convection fan. So I'm going to try this and I will give an update because I'll make another batch of tempeh with these black beans, hopefully. So, and it's topcultures.com for the tempeh. Okay, so I know a lot of you already have the Breville. This is not a reason to go buy your $400 toaster oven, though. If you just needed a little push and you have the money, I can help you with that. But a lot of the other less expensive toaster ovens are now starting to have dehydrators and air fryer functions. There's a Cuisinart that does that. Like I said, if you have a fancy dehydrator like an Excalibur or something like that, it's going to work in there. It can work in your oven with just the light on. The reason I say can is that my tempeh gets really hot in there. So I have a thermometer that I was using to check. So that's another thing that's a nice thing to have. And so I just have this little Taylor digital thermometer. And I did that because you want to see if it's culturing up. And the reason it's showing nothing is because I don't have it on. And you can change it from Celsius and Fahrenheit for you fancy people in Canada who understand Celsius. And Marilyn says she has a Broad and Taylor bread proofer that will work. Absolutely. I was hoping to do the bread proofer setting on the Breville, but it only lasts for 2 hours. And since we're looking at a process that takes 24 to 30 hours, that wasn't going to work for me. But with the dehydrator, I can have it on easily for 25 to 30 hours. Another thing you can do in the Instant Pot brand multi-cooker, if you have a yogurt setting. So that means if you have any version except for Luxe, right? So if you have the Luxe model, that doesn't have a yogurt setting. So on the Instant Pot, there are 3 yogurt settings. And in fact, on the Milty, there are 3 as well, but they do a little bit different for the low. So the highest one is the one where they're planning on boiling milk to pasteurize it, to then let it cool down for you to make it yogurt. So that's the one that if we're pouring our soy milk out of carton, we don't use. The second one is one that brings it up to like 115 degrees, which is a little bit high, and that could have some problem with the tempeh. But the lower one, and actually let me get you the exact temperatures because I wrote them down over here. So yeah, the normal mode goes from 96.8 to 109, and the one that does the low is 86 to 93 degrees, and that's what we're looking for. So on the less mode of yogurt, you can culture it. And in fact, let me show you 2 experiments I have right here. So I did some, and I don't know how to say this, T-E-P-A-R-Y, Tempeh beans. And one of these was done in the Breville, and the other one was done in the Instant Pot on that setting. And let's see if you can see overhead, right? Okay. And this one's fatter just because I made it fatter. That has nothing to do with anything else, but see how it's nice? It's all cultured. You can probably see some of the little snowy, yummy stuff on there. I've not pasteurized this yet, but I just kind of wanted to show you. So I did a test, and I found that it worked just fine on that. Okay. Let me sit these back in there, and I've got more tempeh I'm going to bring out to show and tell later. So there's lots of different ways. Now, when my light was on, nothing had been cooking in the oven, it got, the tempeh, the inside of it got up to like 115 degrees. So I moved it out. I was able to save it by putting it in the Breville. It's still cultured, but it took a lot longer. So that's why you might want to go ahead and have a temperature, a thermometer that you can check the inside. I'm kind of surprised that my oven's that hot. I know that traditionally a lot of Indians culture their yogurt in the oven that way. And maybe I was just being optimistic that it was going to be a little bit less. So just be aware of that if you're doing it that way. Do you guys have any questions about that so far? And yeah, bread proofer, you can go and find fancy smancy things that people make with coolers for tempeh to keep it a certain temperature. But I've really had good success. Oh, I do want to show you this one thing too. So when you're putting your tempeh in to culture it, you don't really want it to sit on the floor of it as much. It can, but it's nice to have it up. This is just a little OXO. I think it's supposed to be a roast cooker, but you could also use something small that came with it just to have it up a little bit, right? And this, I just put the wavy side down and it squishes in there perfect. And I just sat that up there so the air circulation could, well, I guess there's not much air circulation, but whatever little air circulation was able to be there. As much as if your beans are too wet, they don't culture. If they're too dry, they don't culture either. And so I have found myself flipping things around more in the Breville. And before this goes on, let's see. I'll show you some of these guys too. So this is still culturing. You see how it has some white stuff and not others? Okay, this is Chana Dal. My first batch of Chana Dal did not work well. I'll tell you that, because it looked like dal. So if it doesn't look almost more peanutty, right, or separate. But if a section is too dry, it's going to culture last, and it's just taking a while. And this is like a full batch. So I think it probably tonight, if not the morning, will be cultured enough. And I think these guys are really close too. And these, so I'm hoping if you guys like this, that what we'll do is a Tempeh 102 class where we do some of these other things that I'm doing now. You know, Joanne, I don't know if you could use an 8-quart for multi-levels. I was using an 8-quart to, you might be able to. I'm just not sure if it would. One other thing to know too is that as the tempeh starts going, so like right now, it feels almost like it has a little bit of a fever, a light fever. And so what will happen is if there's a bunch of tempeh too close together, it can make it overheat and make the culture fail. So I'm not sure about that. What you could do is you could give it a try and just make sure to keep taking the temperatures, because they're even in here in the Breville, I've been fine. I have over ripened a couple, and I'll show you those too. And that's when the black mold comes, but it's not like the black mold that you can't live in your house for. It's just not going to taste quite as fresh and yummy. And you can see even here, these are scarlet runner beans that I've just cut up with a knife. Because, and I didn't think it was going to culture. It took longer. It's much bigger. These beans are big. Okay, you can kind of see in there. I know it's hard to see in there. There you go. A little bit. You can see the fuzz, but it still needs more. And like right here is a spot that maybe was drier, and we'll see if it cultures as well. So that's why I'm leaving it in there. There comes a point where you're trying to get all the little bits to culture versus not growing that more dark mold to over ripen it. And let me see if I can, because this one definitely went overripe. Actually, I'll just do Tempeh show and tell right now. It'll be easier for me to get all these out. And then I'm going to put them back in because I'm going to eat them. And these have been pasteurized, and we'll look at that. So you don't have to pasteurize your tempeh, but it'll keep for a few days in the fridge. But if you pasteurize it, it'll keep it for almost up to 2 weeks. You can also just go straight into the freezer. That is okay. And so see how this one has just a little bit of dark there? Let me let you see it better here. See that? So that's where it was just a little bit overripe. This is my soy tempeh. And this is the one that I did by breaking them up in the food processor. I used the tempeh culture from Indonesia. See how that is over? And in Indonesia, they even have recipes for overripe tempeh. So there's no need to feel guilty. So I'm going to see what I can do with that. And what happens is that it's not bad, but it's not going to taste as fresh. It's going to taste a little more sour. And so I'm going to see, and this is the black bean tempeh. And so I have some other experiments to make. So the reason you want to just kind of be careful is that some starters, so like the starter I used for this whole soybeans where that got dark very, very fast, I think that just works faster than the other culture. So one culture may take 30 hours, another one may take 12 hours. So you want to keep checking and seeing what's going on and testing it out. And Joanne, I know like you're talking about stacking it like with things in between them. I'm just wondering if the tempeh itself making more heat will actually raise the temperature too much for the whole batch. Okay, so now we're going to do something different than I've ever done before, and we're going to play the black bean video. And I will sit here with you. Today, we are going to start making our black bean tempeh. So we're going to try and take out some of the variables. And to do that, I'm going to go ahead and use some canned organic black beans today. Because one of the tricks with tempeh is the beans have to be pretty al dente. So with beans being the variable, that can be a little bit harder, and oftentimes people recommend going ahead and using the longer cooking time on the stove or to undercook a little bit in the Instant Pot. And we'll talk more about that later, but I thought our first tempeh could just be a little bit easier and low maintenance, also take less time and effort from you to get it started. So we are going to be using some apple cider vinegar or white vinegar. We are using 2 cans of organic black beans. And we're going to be using a tempeh starter. For this one, we're going to be using a half teaspoon, which is half the packet of this Cultures for Health. You can get this online. You can get this straight from Cultures from Health. They also have a Cultures from Health soy-free. So that means it wasn't grown on soybeans. So like the ingredients on the regular one is rice, soybeans, and the culture, which I will not try to pronounce, but I will write down somewhere for you in the list of things you need to get. So that's what we're going to start with, and I'll let you look at these beans. Okay. There we go. So what I've done to these beans right now is I have just drained and rinse them and then let them drain a little bit longer in a colander. So you can kind of see they're still a little moist. Now that moistness is not going to work for us. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be drying these beans. So there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You could take clean, very, very clean, not just I've only wiped my hands on it clean dish towels, right? Because we're working with the culture and fermenting, so we need to make sure everything stays really clean. And in fact, we're even going to put some vinegar on these beans to kind of make sure they're good. And I even clean this bowl out with vinegar just to sterilize it. So you want to kind of have a sterile environment as much as possible. We're going to put 2 teaspoons of apple cider or white vinegar. Okay, we're going to put these on before we start the drying process. And back behind me, you can see the Breville. And it's the Breville Oven Air, which means it's got the air fryer, dehydrator, proofer. So what I'm going to be doing with this black bean tempeh is using it start to finish. This does not mean you need a Breville. Okay, this is not your excuse to have a $400 toaster oven. However, I know a lot of you have them. You could use a regular dehydrator, right, to do what we're doing. You can also use a hair dryer, which that just gives me the willies a little bit, and I don't own one. So we're not going to do that. So what we're going to do, we're going to toss this with the vinegar, is see how glossy these beans are? We want them to be a little less glossy. We want them to be a little drier. They're not going to be all the way dry, but we are going to spread them. I'm trying to decide if we're going to spread it on 1 or 2 sheets of these, because these are just the air fryer dehydrator racks. that go with the Breville. You could do the same thing just in your regular dehydrator or my little cheapy one. And the thrift stores are open again, so you can get some of those cheapy plastic dehydrators, and that would work good too. I am going to go ahead and make this 2 sheets in hopes that maybe this will dry a little bit sooner. Okay? And I'm probably going to have some wetness, especially from the vinegar. And I'll just wipe that up real quick. And just divide it as evenly as possible and get them where there's some space as much as possible. But I don't expect you to move each bean individually, right? And we can always move some of these. I'm going to take a few more though and put over here from that one, just to make it a little more easy and even. And see, that's what I told you was going to happen. But I am not sad about it. Okay. And then we'll come back over here so you can kind of see me. And I'm just spreading these. And next, I'm going to take you to a camera that's showing the Breville. Okay. So what I'm coming back to put my picture here too. Here we go. Hey, so Joanne says that she watched a gal who sells her tempeh in Tampa use a hairdryer and it works fast. I just don't know. It's a personal thing that makes me feel kind of like, ugh, you've just had your hair all up in there and now you're putting it on something that you're sterilizing everything for. But it is a common practice. So don't let my weird quirks stop you from using your hairdryer. If you don't have a dehydrator to do this, an air fryer is perfect. I mean, a hairdryer. You could probably use your air fryer too, but you don't want to get them crunchy. What I do is open the Breville, and I'm going to go ahead and alternate these so they're not one on top of the other. And you could do this too with your dehydrator if you wanted to. And then I'm going to have this on the dehydrate setting. I'm not sure if you can see that very clearly. It says for 16 hours. That doesn't really matter because I am going to be watching it a little more carefully than that. It is at 126 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so it's been about 13 or 14 minutes. I've checked on the beans and they look a little more matte. So I also kind of scraped all the extra moisture out of this and let it dry the rest of the way while those beans were kind of drying. Okay, so I'm going to put this about here so you can see what we're getting ready to work with. Okay, too, I want to interject that drying the beans, I think, is going to be in a dehydrator is going to be a minimum of 10 minutes. It can be longer. So the first batch, I was super great about spreading them out and doing all that stuff, right? Well, in future batches, I was not so good. And because I just kept having tempeh I was culturing in there, and I was putting 1 or 2 racks in there to dry. So just know that at that point, it can take 20-25 minutes to dry if you have a very thick layer, and I would go in and stir it. It just depends on what you have, so there's no one right or wrong way. Just know that. Okay, and Linda finally found the chat. Yay, Linda. There's no apologies for asking anything ever. And I don't see your question, though. I just see you apologizing. So can you put your question in, and I will answer it. I'll stop this little video when it's time. And Joanne, what Joanne says is, well, if you're going to make tempeh often for less than $20, you can get your own tempeh hairdryer. And I do like the idea of a dedicated hairdryer. So, and Linda says, if your Instant Pot doesn't have a yogurt maker button, can you still use it to make yogurt? No. No, you can't. There may be some ways around it, but what I would do to make yogurt is then I would try and use the oven. So you can have your oven on with, well, actually, you have your oven off, no temperature, no oven settings are there, and you just turn on the oven light, and then you can put it in there, and you should be able to culture yogurt and dosa batter and things like that. I was saying before, let me grab this over here, handy dandy little thermometer guy that you can check. So when I put my tempeh into the oven, it was too hot. And so I was able to salvage it, but it got up to like 115 degrees very quickly. And that was a little bit too high for it. So I hope that helps. Now back to black bean tempeh. I'm going to take some of the beans. And you might want to use pot holders. This is okay for me, but do you see how they're a little more matte? They're not as glossy, which means they are more dried and not as soaking wet. I mean, they're beans, right? So they're not dried like before they were cooked. They're just a lot of the excess moisture is gone. And that's what we're really looking for. Let me get the other tray. I also, while I was doing this, I switched the tray's position just to help it be more even as distribution of how everything was going. I've got these little beans everywhere. You may not be able to see it, but that is what I'm doing now, is picking these guys up. Okay? And we should see those really good. So don't forget these guys. Don't waste a tiny little bit of it. Okay. So Joanne had a question. She said, my oven has LED lighting and I don't think that would work. And it shouldn't be generating any heat, but I would test it just to see. Because mine is too hot and I was actually thinking of replacing it with a different bulb. So let's find, if you find out about that, let me know. I know the whole thing about LED lights is they do not get as hot as regular lights, which is why actually behind me, all the lights up in the kitchen, they used to be like fluorescents when it was horrible up here in the summer. But even sometimes with the LEDs, I feel like I can tell that there's heat. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one. Okay, and if you're using a less powerful dehydrator, or if you're using the dish towel method, or if you are using a hair dryer, it may take longer than this. But this is kind of what you're going for. This kind of matte, but if I squish it, it's still a wet bean. I have taken half of this, half of a packet, which is a half a teaspoon, okay? And we're gonna sprinkle it on here, and then we're gonna mix it up together. And I'm gonna use this. Now I wanna try as carefully as I can to not smash the beans, but to get this incorporated and all over the beans. So we're basically putting this starter everywhere, because when it, as it grows, it's going to knit these beans together. So it wants to be on the inside, right? The inside parts as it's stacked up, as well as on the outside. And one thing that you should know too is, so some of these beans are a little smashed or open, and that's okay. They don't need to be absolutely perfect. And in fact, some beans that have a thicker skin, we will actually put in the food processor to break them in pieces a little bit. That looks really, really nice. So the next thing we're going to do, and actually let me just put this here, I think you might see it better over here. So I've taken a Ziploc bag, and this is one of my skewers. You could use a sterilized needle, large needle, and I put holes fairly symmetrically about the size of a quarter in between them. Okay, so that's how we're doing it with this method. We're going to look at another method that you don't have to, actually I'll just leave this here so you can kind of get that. So what this is going to do is let it breathe, and that's what's going to also help everything come together. So I'm going to open this, and then I'm going to carefully put the beans in here. Once I get a few in, I'll dump the rest in. And we want them to be packed fairly tight when we're culturing it. So I think at this point, I might be, well, let's still use a spoon. You want to have as little contact with everything as possible too. Shake this so it doesn't fall over. Okay. And so it's a fairly dry mixture. Fairly dry for beans. So see how we want it to be thickness wise, not this thick, right? But between about 1/2 and 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to go ahead and close this up a little bit. We're also going to be able to get some of this air out. So see how these are loosey-goosey here? I don't want that. But I'm going to try and make it as flat as I can. You could even put a piece of tape there, or we could do it like this to make sure that, again, we want it tight, but we want it where it can breathe. And then we can flatten it out a little bit. Whoops, sorry about that. I muted myself. So let's try that one again. Okay, sorry guys. Like I said, new excitement. I'll wait till it catches up a little bit. I know, I just unmuted and now I'm yelling it and everybody's going to hear it. Okay, so hopefully you can hear me now. I am sorry for the delay, and I'll see if Dawn maybe can edit this out for the future version of this. So other than doing the Ziploc plastic bags, you can use something like a Pyrex dish. So I successfully was able to use a Pyrex dish. And what I did is I covered it with a film of saran wrap and poked holes, just like in the bag, so it could breathe a little bit. And I've seen that other people have actually moistened cloth, like clean, and it's got to be very sterilized clean to go over the top. And that's especially if you're using something like a dehydrator that has a fan going, because that's going to dry out your tempeh too much for it to culture. Okay. So that is one thing you can do. Another thing, if it's not the plastic that bothers you about the Ziplocs, but then it not being reusable, another thing you can do is you can actually take like the Rubbermaid containers, and with the top and the bottom, you can drill tiny holes in there about 1/4 width apart. And that's another way that you could do it. So you could just always have a couple of containers for tempeh and just keep reusing them over and over again. And I kind of like that idea because I do use some plastic, but I know some people are anti-plastic all the way. I think that with the Ziploc bags, because there is a better airflow, it does help you guarantee more success on your first batch. So I would encourage you, unless there's a reason, to go ahead, and if you have a Ziploc bag, go ahead and do that. Oh, yeah, the Rubbermaid idea is awesome, and Cheryl actually is going to be hooking me up for that. She doesn't know that yet, because it is kind of a pain to go and poke holes in these bags over and over and over again. And I feel really certain once you watch this and once you make your first batch, you'll make more, because it's just not that hard. And Brenda said, could you use a nylon nut milk bag, putting the dish inside the bag? I have not tried that, but I do have one of your nut milk bags, so maybe I should try that. And I will, I'll report back. So I'll see if I can, I know I don't have it out and about right now, but I'll see if I can do another batch, and I will report back into the group on Padilla. Because don't forget, all these and these videos that I'm kind of working with, teaching with, they're going to be separate download or separate videos you can watch in addition to the whole class with all the extra information. So hopefully that'll help. Sorry about the mic mistake. And now let's make more tempeh. So now that we've kind of packed our tempeh mixture in with the spores and everything, it's good. It's in our little baggie. We're going to put it on the same kind of rack that we used if you're using the Breville oven. You could also be using your dehydrator to do exactly the same thing, because once again we're going to go back in here and use the dehydrate function, but instead of using the default temperature, which was 120 something, we are going to use 88 degrees. And I believe there is still a dehydrator limit, which we'll go find out in a second. But we want to keep checking on this to make sure things are going along as we hope it is. So let's go ahead and, actually this is very interesting. Let's try, you can do 36 hours. And so let's try that. And just because it may be ready in 36 hours, it may need just a little bit more or a little bit less. We may not leave it on the entire, without checking it. We're not going to just leave it there for 3 days. What we're going to do is keep checking in on it, and I'm going to come back and let you see what's happening as it's going. I'll probably check it first thing. This is around 5:30 at night. I will probably check it when I get up in the morning, so it will be more than 12 hours. We'll see what it looks like, and it will give us a chance to just kind of hang out. Tempeh is not something you make in a day. That's why we're doing this whole class differently with the videos pieced together. Okay? I will see you probably in a little while. Hey everybody, it's been what, 15, 16 hours since we put the tempeh in, so we're going to check it. It's still in the dehydrator setting of the Breville Air. You could use a regular dehydrator. You don't need this fancy one. This is just the biggest one I have, though I don't even need it to be that big. I'm going to stop this, and that way you won't hear that noise for just a little bit. Since it's 88 degrees, I can touch this. It's actually not very hot at all. Let me get this where we can really see a little bit better. There we go. Okay, so you can see some of this is actually condensation, but you can see a little bit of fuzz happening too. And also one of the things that I'm noticing is this is, when I was putting it in, remember, it was kind of flopping around. It definitely is starting to feel like a cohesive little chunk O beans instead of a bunch of beans that I just put in here and I could have wobbled around. So that's how I can kind of know that it's starting to set up in here. It is a little hard to tell sometimes when you see the condensation and you can see the white. And so I don't know how good you can see that from there. But basically this is our one check just to make sure everything's going. You can really see it a little bit on there. The lights make it a little bit harder. Probably around 24 hours, so around 5:30 p.m. today, I am going to check this again and see how it's doing. If it feels super hot, like it has a temperature, we may lower either the temperature of the dehydrator. Let me get this back on. Or we could just take it out depending on what your environment is. So it's hotter than 88 degrees probably today outside, even though I think right now it's probably only about 74 or 75 degrees. It is around probably 73 to 74 here because we've got the air cranked. I could also turn down the air and pull it out. So as the cultures really start working, they build some heat within itself. So that's something that we just have to keep in mind. If it gets too hot, the culture that we're trying to make grow will die off, and there'll be another kind of slimier culture that will take over. So we'll be checking back on that. So fingers crossed, everybody, and I'll see you later today. Okay, so it's been a little over 24 hours. So let's take a look at the tempeh now. And remember, I'm just taking this out of the dehydrator. It's really easy to see the cake, and it feels heavier and more knitted together. So let me show you on the overhead camera. And I can't get too terribly close, but let me see. You can kind of see on the bottom and on the sides. See that? See how all that white? There is some condensation, you can see that, but that's separate from the white. So we've got the white stuff here, condensation over there. See how that's different? So almost all of this is culture. And it's feeling very hefty and like a cake, and I would say that's probably about an inch or so. And so see where I folded it over? And you can see how that packed it down into here. So the next step, because it's not all the way done, there's still some spots that aren't covered, it's not knitted together quite enough. So we're going to give it another 12 to 24 hours to kind of see how it's going. So we'll do some more checks then, okay? So now the most super exciting part of all, our tempeh's done, and I'm going to bring it out for you to see. I have some other things, experiments going on in here right now, but I want you to look at this. Can you guys see it looks like it's snow? Actually, it's overexposed because there's so much white. And let me show you from overhead. This will help even more. Look at that. There's no doubt that this is the spores instead of water or anything like that. So there's just no mistake in it. And it's very firm, and it's beautiful, I think. You know how I like to hug things that I like. One thing that you'll notice when you touch it is it actually almost feels as if it has a slight fever because it's more than 88 degrees. So one of the lessons that I've learned by using the dehydrator instead of using the Instant Pot to incubate it is that the dehydrator does a far better job. You can adjust the temperature. Now you can't on the cheap dehydrator that I have, but so if you have one or like a multi toaster oven air fryer sorts of situation, and I'll check too, I haven't checked on my other air fryer to see just how low it will go, so I might be able to go a little bit lower on it. But what happens is as it gets that internal warmth building up, when it's in the Instant Pot, it can kill off some of the bacteria we're trying to grow. It doesn't grow bad bacteria, but it grows kind of slimier bacteria. So while I may try one again just to show you, this is definitely my preferred method by far. So anyhow, I want to see pictures if you've made your first batch using canned black beans or not. You don't have to. You can use, and I'm going to use the words al dente, the opposite of like my creamy beans that I like to have. So we want them to be more like canned, separated, but not so that when we squish two spoons together, they pop apart like a peanut, that's still going to be too underdone, and that's going to hurt your stomach. So there's this fine line that we have to play with. That's why I wanted to take it out of the equation for your very first batch of tempeh. Now, I'm thinking with black bean tempeh, you could use it any way you would use normal tempeh, but it would be kind of fun to make tempeh tacos. Don't be afraid, it worked like a charm. Okay, so I am unmuted for sure, and these are the beans, but let's talk for a minute. So, Brenda says she's excited to try her own, and so is Joanne. Get you guys up here. And a question Joanne asked was, can you use the dehydrator with the door open? And you can, because in fact, the door kind of jammed open by mistake and it was still running. So I think you could do that. I also misspoke, and my little cheapy dehydrator sure does have a temperature thing. So I don't know what I was thinking. So I'm sorry, I'm wrong often. But you can kind of see from that whole process that it's really just not that hard. And the thing is the beans that you start with are very important. So if you remember correctly, before we started that video, I started these beans, black beans that have been soaked overnight, right? And they've been steamed. There's water underneath this. And you can see that some of them are open, right? But we can always go find one, and we can do our bean test to make sure that they're soft enough, because we can tell that they're, you know, and smush it, okay? And it doesn't just cut in half, so it's not going to be bad for our digestion. I'm eating it just so I can make sure it's good enough, okay? So I think what we're going to do is kind of do a little bit of this to begin with. So we'll go over to my sink, a place that you never ever get to see, really. Let me grab one of these. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of show you part of the process. Can you still see? Yeah. I can't really see what I'm doing on the camera. So I'm just going to get this out. And since these are hot, I also want to cool them off, right? So that's something else that I want to do, because if they're too hot, that can mess with the tempeh culture as well. So let me see if I can get this up where you can see the beans a little bit more. There we go. And I'm just going to spray it with cold water to stop some of the cooking process. And I'm doing that in a big strainer because I still don't want to have very much water. But this just kind of helps me get the beans started at a temperature that I want them started at. Yeah, that's cooled them down. This is the bowl that I soak the beans in, but actually let's use this one instead. This is nice and clear. So try and get as much water out as I can. I'm going to pour them into this bowl. It doesn't have to be perfectly dry at this point because we're going to dry them next. So what we are going to do though is we're going to sterilize them. Let's move this back a little bit. There we go. So I'm going to put a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar on and mix that in. And so we're really doing exactly the same thing again that you saw. So I'm just going to do it a little bit just so you can kind of see. I can't see if you have any questions, so I'm going to stir this around a minute and then I'm going to go back to the computer and look. And what this does is this sterilizes it and makes it good to culture. And And Brenda says there's about dehydrators. Excalibur and Tribest seem to only go down to 95 degrees. That's awesome. And because I don't have one of those, I don't know, you know? So, I think I sucked a bean skin down my throat, in case you were wondering. So what I'm going to do, and actually we can do this with this other camera too. I wish I could just control them with my mind. Is we're going to put these in here. And I've gotten to where I'm using more and more and just on one sheet and just being willing to wait longer. But do realize if it's not dry enough or if it's too dry, I did do one batch that was too dry, that there will be issues, okay? But since I just kind of wanted to double show you what's going on, and now you get to see my bean lake over there. And then I'm just going to put it in here in the dehydrator. Actually, I'm going to move this guy up a little bit. And then probably after class or thereabouts, it will be ready for me to, let me get the bean lake kind of squared away. So I would encourage you to do those things either over the sink or on a counter that you don't mind wiping off. Because it does definitely make less of a mess. So do you guys have, let's see, here we go. Joanne said her girlfriend's Excalibur went down to like 85. And she used to use it and messed up once when she had it set super low. And so there can be some discrepancies. And you could also look for something in particular. I think it's 86 is the lowest this goes. And so I've been experimenting a little bit with if I have the fan on or the fan off. If I change the temperature, does that make any difference? And that's something that I'm still working on. So, but I do like that a lot. And that's something that we can look at. And I haven't looked, I will also go look at my dehydrator that's probably in a pile of mess since I've been using the Breville. But I'll try and see what the lowest one is. It's like the old Nesco or something. And Brenda says they changed it to 95. And their machines do not hold temp exactly. Oh, that's not good for that. Those things are expensive. And Kiki from Healthy Sexy Kitchen says she'll have to test her Excalibur. It shows 106, but it appears to be able to go a little lower. And Marilyn was disappointed when she had to replace the thermostat and the range had increased. I'm so sorry about that, you guys. Originally it was 105.6 and then they changed it to 95. Okay, well, that's not the most awesome thing, but let's look now. So do you guys have any questions about black bean in general? And I know that we can still talk about all these other things a little bit more, and you are going to have to experiment some. Now, I wish everything was just easy, but fermentation can be a little bit wonky anyhow. What I would say is you can always try and get it started at a little bit of a higher temperature for a little while and then kind of test it out. You may not keep your house as cold as we do. We're middle-aged ladies. It's cold in here. We keep it around like 72 or 73. Last year I was keeping it that cold for my senior dog who was having issues. So we've gotten used to it. But if you can keep your house at 88 degrees for a couple of days, you can make tempeh just out in the wild, you know, on your dining room table or something like that. Obviously, you still want to have it be a sterile environment, and you would want to have it covered so just everything and dust isn't getting on it and things like that. But that's another thing that you could try during the summer for sure. Okay, let me close that out. And now let's go to the soy tempeh video. Hey everybody, so what we're going to do now, these beans, these are whole soybeans that have been soaked for about 24 hours. I have drained and rinsed them, okay? So there are two ways we can try and dehull these. And before you watch this and you say, it's way too much work for me, remember, we've got our black bean tempeh that we don't have to do this with. So if we have beans with a thin skin, we can skip this. Okay, so I'm going to interrupt this for a moment because Brenda had a black bean question. So, and actually I'm covering my face. I will cover my other face. So, you know fermentation is done when basically, especially the black bean one is easier to tell because you can really see the white mold on it. And, oh yeah, did I not say, Marilyn, that you could use a bread proofer? I kept trying to think that I said that. But so with the fermentation, if you let it go too far, it's going to start having little black spores, which is it trying to make more of itself. So you want it to stay white. You want it to be a firm cake. So whenever it's firm and well knitted together, and I kind of encourage you, wash your hands a lot, but, which we're doing anyhow, right? But touch the tempeh as it's going along. Every time you go in, you can pick it up a little bit. And if you pick it up and it's still beans and it goes around, you can just pack it back down again if it's in the early stages. As it gets there, when you pick it up, you feel it be more and more solid. When we're doing this kind of an inch or less, it's pretty easy to see. It's also easy to see and feel it in these Pyrex, not in the Pyrex, in these resealable plastic bags. And that's another reason why it might be worth, even just as an educational tool, if you have one, to make your first batch that way. Also, I like it because then I can turn it over, and I've been doing that more with later batches, is turning it over so I can encourage a better growth pattern. This is not necessarily a scientific fact. This is what I am experimenting with. So just so you know that too. But basically, it's firm. You can pick it up and move it around. Nothing's like, it's not like having a bag of potatoes or a sack of potatoes going around. And when you open it, it should smell good still. It shouldn't smell sour or rancid. It should smell, you know, a little bit umami, a little bit cheesy, vinegary kind of smell. And I hope, does that help, Brenda? Tell me that. And Joanne is also saying her garage does 85 to 90 degrees all day. I don't know how you keep your garage that cool in Florida, is all I have to say. And, oh, okay, y'all, that's a great idea too. And Joanne's saying she's going to use an Amazon delivery box to use that for garage dehydrating. And I think that's great. Yeah. And so, Joanne, I'm saying, like, if you use the bags, just because you can touch it more, when I did it with the glass container, you can't touch it and move it around quite the same way. I mean, you could see the white film growing on the top and the bottom and the sides still, but I do like that kind of feel, and you can kind of get an idea more of what's going on. Yeah. So hopefully that helps. And if it does, we'll go back to soybeans, where I'm encouraging you to try the soybeans. So, but anyhow, so soy tempeh may or may not be for you. So the first way we're going to do this, these are not cooked yet. These have just been soaked and rinsed. So this is half my batch. We're going to do half the batch this way with the food processor. The other batch, we're actually going to dehull manually by doing a little Zen massage, and we're going to look at that. So what we want to do is use the food processor. You can see you'll fill it up about as far as you normally do, about here, right? There's no liquid in here. I think you're going to see this a little bit better from the front. We're just going to pulse it. perhaps. Let's try now that it's on right. You don't want to chop it too much. So that's probably about right. We don't have to get every single hull off, but because they're thick, they are going to prevent things. So like you can kind of see there's a few pieces here. We're going to actually cook these and skim them off as we're cooking. Okay? So we will look at doing a little more of that in a minute. The other option is I have the other half that I soaked and rinsed and have put into more water, okay? And so literally we're going to massage the beans together. And can you guys sort of see? These are some of the skins that are coming off. Let me grab a bowl. It's going to fill up a bowl. And this is probably going to take, I don't know, kind of depends on your patience level. But you're just kind of massaging it. Think about, it's relaxing. You don't have to have the water too cold or too hot. Some of these are going to soak. And we can see that they're coming off, these little skins. Hopefully you guys can see those fairly clearly. Right? And yes, there's still a lot more beans than there are skins right there. So what I do is I take a handful together and I literally rub them back and forth, right? See how that's getting some of those off? And I'm just doing that in the water. Also, if you feel like you've got a lot in there you haven't scooped out, if you toss them, sometimes they get caught under the heavier beans. So the benefit to this way, so basically one way or another, you're going to spend some time. So it depends on what you like to do. I'm going to try this with the food processor again. So with those, you need to cook them on the stove in a pot so you can skim off the, the skins as they float up. So the beans will become heavier, slip to the bottom. So you have to be in front of the stove while they're cooking. Whereas the ones that we're going to do this way, it may take a half an hour just to do this, but I'm going to watch some TV once I get off of the video. So I'm not going to make you watch this for 20 minutes. But you can kind of see already, you can see that some of these are even splitting, right? And that's really our goal, is we want these to get off and get as split as possible. Okay, so I'm going to interject in here that if you can buy pre-split dehulled soybeans, you get to skip this step. What I will also say is I was very disappointed because I found two places you could get them and I was not able to buy them. And one was just ridiculously expensive for just being dehulled. And Brenda's also saying, here, let me put this up, that when she's taking skins off beans, when she's taking skins off almonds, she soaks and then puts a batch between tea towels and rubs on the counter. The skins will peel off. And that is worth a try. The soybean skins really like to stay on there. So I found them much harder than almonds or even garbanzo beans as far as getting them off. So I felt like they really needed to exfoliate against each other, but maybe the tea towel would do that too. And you just want to make sure your tea towels are very, very, very clean, right? We don't want to introduce anything here, though we will do the vinegar after this process because we'll cook them. No, yeah, they're just soaked. Then we will cook them. Okay, back to the feature film. I was not able to find a source this time anywhere for split soybeans. So if you can buy split soybeans to begin with, you don't have to do this process. Another thing you can use is chana dal, which are baby chickpeas that are skinned and split already. And over here, I have some of those cooking right now. while they aren't necessarily in our class this time, if we don't do them this time, we're going to do them in Tempeh 102. But I need to go through, this is first trial on those, but theoretically, they should work just fine, and you won't have to do any of this. And that's the tempeh I showed you a few minutes ago that I said still needed to go a little while. I showed you the yellow one. That was the chana dal that I was cooking here. And remember, if you haven't watched basically the black bean tempeh for beginners, it's the best way to start, because you're using, for your very first batch of tempeh, we're taking away the cooking aspect. So this one we've only soaked, right? And again, I'm going to get some of these guys out. I'm just spending more time massaging than I am actually picking these out, because it's easier when there's more of them. Like even now, there's tons more than there were before. And they should float if you move it a little bit. And if you get out a split chickpea, you can just put it back. Okay? So for this process, this is in general for soybeans only. You can do some other thick-skinned beans like runner beans, like scarlet runner beans, but what's recommended is to chop them instead of trying to remove the skins. So removing the skins is pretty much a mostly soybean thing. Now you could use regular chickpeas, and then you would do this process, just like we've done before in classes for like the smoothest hummus in the world. You peel the skins off of the chickpeas. So you would kind of do that process too. Okay, I will come back with another part when some of these are cooked, okay? Okay, so I want to show you kind of what it looked like when I dehulled these. So I had a bowl of hulls, and this is about what it looks like. It's not perfect. See, there's still some skins on there, some hulls. That's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect, but there just has to be enough hulls gone that we can still inoculate it properly. And that's what we're going for. Does that make sense? Okay. So in the book that I'm recommending to you guys, Miso, Tempeh, and Natto, they talk about steaming their soybeans in the Instant Pot. So we're going to give that a go. And I think what it's going to do is produce a little bit of a drier bean, which will be helpful for us later on. So there's about a cup of water underneath there. I've got the steamer in, and I'm just going to put these soaked and hulled. So remember, they've been soaked. And I want to make sure not necessarily to grab all the hulls from the bottom there like I just did. I would like to try and avoid some of those. But I'm also going to just go in here and then I'll see what I can pick off the top too, if there's some easy. Because again, it doesn't have to be perfect to be delicious. And that's why we like to cook it all anyhow, right? Okay, let's see. Do I see any? See, there we go. There's some hulls, easy enough to pick out. Don't want to take that bean with it. And I think what happened is the friction with the wire on the bottom got me a few more hulls and skins off, okay? So I'm just going to spread these out kind of even while I'm doing this. And I find it kind of relaxing, the whole dehulling process, honestly. So I'm going to just put those in there. And then we're actually going to steam it. So we're going to use the steam setting. And we're going to steam it for 10 minutes. Sometimes these handles can get stuck in there. So I'm actually going to look over here and go to steam and steam for 10 minutes. And I'm going to say natural pressure release. Actually, I'm going to say quick pressure release. Because since we're steaming, even though there's water, it probably won't spray everywhere. And this is a Milty 2.0. Okay, so this is where earlier I said, don't do that with the Milty 2.0. Make it a natural pressure release. I don't know how much Dawn has cut out, but it just kept going pss, pss, during the middle of it. So just know that as well, okay? It's going to open up automatically. So we'll set that aside for about 10 minutes. Okay, so for the ones that we did the dehull in the food processor, right, these guys, we're going to put these in water, and then we're going to bring it to a boil, and we're going to try skimming off the hulls. I did not have great success last time I did this, but I wanted to do it one more time because once is never a good idea, right? And I'm pretty sure this is getting warm. Yeah, okay. And in case you're wondering, that's just me checking that that pan works with the induction burner and is not something you need to do at home. I'm just trying to make sure that this pan is working on the induction burner. And so at this point, we really are just putting hulls and all in here. So everything's just going in here. Now, I will say I made a very silly mistake the first time I did this, which was recently, and what I did is I tried to dehull them after they were cooked, not before they were cooked. So I'm expecting to have my behind handed to me this time, meaning that I think it should work. So we could do something, and I may put a little more water in here too, just to kind of help it be a little more buoyant. So we'll have a little more space for some things. Okay, and we could use something like this. But see, we're not going to be able just to press it down, right? Because they're not going to come up through this. We're going to have to scoop a little bit. Another way that I was trying to work around this is I found basically a T thing so that I can see if I can get some of those off, right? I'm going to see if I can get some off around the top to begin with. And also you're scooping off the foam, and that's fine too. So let me get another bowl for these guys. And I can kind of, we'll watch this for a little bit, right? So you see? Here's a whole bean. Throw him back in. And I think for me and my purposes at this tiny amount that I'm cooking, I think this little guy works great. Okay, so Kiki's saying, can you use canned soybeans? Are they dehulled? You can use canned soybeans, but I don't think canned soybeans are dehulled because they would naturally then split into two. And the soybean, like I've used canned black soybeans, and they're together. And what's keeping them together is that hull. So that's what I would say. But there's a whole other world of beans. It's just soybeans are a little different, okay? I will also put some links to some skimmers, as they exist as a thing. I can always come back in if I have a stray bean like that one. Theoretically, I'm also going to mix this up a little bit to see if I can get some more. The skins do kind of lift, but they also they didn't lift as much as I thought they were going to, which is why I ended up kind of stirring it a little bit the same way I was stirring the dry ones, or not the dry ones, the ones I was massaging to get the skins off of, because it got trapped down below. All in all, it's kind of a pain. I won't lie to you. I found watching a happy TV show while I massaged the beans, it gave me a little less stress. A, because you're not cooking at the same time, and B, I don't know, I just saw more results faster in the beginning, and that made me feel better. With this, there's more results later. So I hope that helps. Of those to come on top. And I may skip through some of this video too, but do you see how
what will happen is they'll get trapped underneath.
Yeah, that's the milkseed doing what it's not supposed to do.
Method is working so much better than when I was trying to do this after the beans were cooked. So,
and I will tell you, I think that in terms of time, it's probably about the same if you're doing it, massaging them, or if you're doing it this way. Right, and this is what I thought people would say. So Kiki's saying, I may skip soybean tempeh, and that is one of the biggest reasons that we're doing other beans as well. So know that I was talking about doing scarlet runner bean tempeh, chana dal tempeh. That's all in there culturing now. I've done black bean tempeh. I did tepary bean tempeh. With something big and thick like the scarlet runner beans, I actually took a chef's knife and cut through them, but I left them really pretty chunky most places. But the key to like smaller beans like dal and things like that, it can't look like dal the stew. So dal is just a split-hulled lentil. But if it looks like the stew, if it looks like, I'm going to eat some of that, instead of like, well, that should cook a little longer, it's probably not going to tempeh, if that makes sense. So, and I may skip through some of this so you don't have to see all the painful parts.
This worked much better. Grown-up people soybeans instead of just the hulls or the skins. I'm going to agitate them a little bit more, just like I'm agitating myself. This is the part that is time consuming. This is the part that makes people not want to make tempeh. But you don't have to make soy tempeh if this bothers you. It may not bother you at all. And that's awesome, right? So,
and Kiki, and I hope I'm saying it right. I've never heard it said out loud. So I think it's tepary beans. I think that's it. They worked like a charm, and the ones I had actually were quite old, so I soaked them extra, but you still have to cook them quite a long time, and I steamed them. So all of these, I've done the same process with the steaming, because as soon as I discovered that, I was like, brilliant, steaming it in the Instant Pot, and it just seems to make things not break down quite as much. Also, if you're doing a bean, I would do it a couple of minutes under what you would normally do, especially if it could sit there for a while and like be on warm or something like that. So that's my advice.
I'm not talking to you if you're like, this looks very cool and very rewarding.
And that's not you guys.
You know, there's always time factors into things, and you just have to figure out, you know, what fits in your life, what serves you, what makes you happy, right? If homemade tempeh and tasting it without that bitter tinge that's often present in commercial tempeh makes you really happy, then that's a really good reason to do this.
And you can do it with other beans.
Okay. Do that.
Okay, we're just going to skip on a little bit. How Dawn
Those look like peanuts, don't they?
Yeah.
I'm going to turn it back on. So let's take a look at these soybeans that we dehulled and that we steamed in the pressure cooker. Let me turn the fan on, see if that helps a little bit too. Okay, so one of the things that's really cool is these almost look like peanuts, don't they? So they look a little bit dry. So the thing is I'm not going to have to drain these, and that's going to be kind of awesome. So one of the things I do need to do is get some vinegar, and I'm going to need a bowl, because the next step is we toss this in the vinegar, and then we're going to dry the soybeans a little bit more. This is just a tray for my dehydrator, and I'm using the Breville. You don't have to have a Breville. Just whatever inexpensive dehydrator you have would work, or you could put it on the oven at the lowest setting. We're just going to first put the vinegar on there, and that's to help it really become clean and kill off.
And I want to go ahead and just reiterate. So when I'm saying you could use your oven at the lowest setting, that is not for culturing the tempeh. That is for helping you dry the beans before you mix it with the culture.
Any bacteria we don't want to grow on purpose, okay? So I'm just gonna, okay, we're just gonna slide that out. If I wanted to be a little OCD, I could take some more of these off the top, over, and then I'm just gonna toss to make sure that I coat. I might even stir it up a couple of times.
Skipping through some of this stuff because some of this you saw just a minute ago with the black beans.
While we're doing this, okay? That's all we're wanting to do, is take most of the moisture out. We're not trying to.
Okay, so I cut it in between from when it had been in there for a while, dehydrating and drying, and now this is the dried.
Dehydrate. Wow, that's a mouthful. It was never meant to be that way, so the word cannot be spoken, okay? So we're looking at that. So it's a little more dry, which is awesome. And then what we're going to do is we're going to mix some culture. And I want to show you the two cultures that I have right now. So this is the one you're going to find really easily. It's from Cultures for Health. And it's going to come in these little packets. Okay? So usually we're going to use a teaspoon, but this is only half of it. So we're going to use about half a teaspoon. And so that's why sometimes I'll have these just kind of resealed back up. Now, I got another culture, and it took a lot longer to get this because it came from Asia, and I got this on Etsy, and it's a natural Asia product at gmail.com. And so it was a little cheaper, but it took a long time to get here. So if you're looking for something to use really quick, you can probably find Cultures for Health somewhere near you too. So I'm going to sprinkle on a half a teaspoon of this. Okay. And this is what's going to grow and make it turn into tempeh. Okay. And I'm just going to take a spatula or a spoon and just try and distribute it evenly. So see, it's like a little dusting. It's like we're giving it a little bit of baby powder. That's what it reminds me of. So you want to get it distributed really well. Okay. And then this is going to be my first test on this new starter to see how I can compare it with the other. Okay. All right. So today we're going to use a quart.
Before we go on, so that new starter that I was trying was the one that worked a lot faster. So that's the one that I let get overripe. So I'm finding that the Cultures for Health does seem to culture slower, and it gives you a little more time. So, and it's easier to find. So I think like the perfect trifecta of let's make my first batch of tempeh is canned beans, Culture for Health, and Ziploc bags.
Size bag. But you could also, if you're going to make a lot of tempeh, you could take one of those Rubbermaid containers that's plastic on the bottom and top and drill little holes with the smallest, I don't know what you call those things, the little attachment makes the smallest holes that you can, about a quarter size apart. And that's
That would be a drill bit. I can remember it now.
We're going to do in this. So I've just got a skewer, and I'm just literally sort of poking holes about a quarter apart, and that quarter as in And if they're too
I never said a quarter, as in the change, like 25 cents.
together, too far apart, there can be a problem, but I haven't really had that happen yet. So let me do it this way. Because the tempeh has to breathe while it's doing this, so it has to have some holes in it. If you're using a glass container like I showed you earlier, you will have to put some plastic wrap with holes on top of it as well. Okay. So next, I always open these and turn them out like this because I find like there's less of a mess. Okay. We'll see if we're going to put all these in here or not. Let's see if I can do it this way. I think I need a little assistance by the spatula. So I'm getting a few out and about, which is not what I'm trying to do. Okay. Let's see. Close this really well. And I'm going to lay it down and make it pretty even. So let's see if you can see on the top of this. So I'm just going to kind of make it even. Oh, I see where that second part isn't really sealed very well. And so obviously it's beans, so they're not staying anywhere right now. And one of the things is like now it's all squibbly. When you pick up the tempeh and it starts to pick up on its own, that's when you know it's starting to be done. So I will try and take some snapshots of this as it's going through. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put it in here with these other tempehs. I'm going to put.
And if you notice, there actually is a Pyrex one in there that I was trying out.
Back here, because I'm not going to move it for a while, and I can make sure that it's level, nice and level here. And I used a sandwich bag for this one. Okay. And I've got this on 88 degrees. So what you want to do really is check back in about 12 hours. It will not be 12 hours because I'm not going to be up at 6 in the morning. So later, at least 12 hours, and then you can kind of see if either it looks like there's a little bit of condensation, a little bit of white. It's hard to tell at first if it's condensation or the white mold growing. But we'll take a look and I'll show you through some of that just like I did for the black bean tempeh. Okay? Have fun. Okay, everybody, time for the big reveal. So we went through the whole soy process, and this has been more than 24 hours. I've had it in 86 degrees here in between 88 and 86 degrees in my Breville. One thing I learned recently is that I could turn the convection fan off so that it doesn't make me crazy. I have some other experiments in here, but I want to take these two are exactly the ones that you've seen me do bit by bit. Now they're using two different cultures, and one actually seems to ripen up a lot faster, but I wanted to leave them in the same amount of time and just have us look at this and see what's going on. So let's look from above. Okay, this was the one that was made in the food processor, and I've used the cultures for health spores, and it's really good. It's nice, it's solid, it's white, right? You see that nice coating of white? Kind of little hair-like substances. This one last night wasn't quite ready, so I've decided to leave it in overnight. But now you can see it's some of the darker portions, which means it's a little bit overripe. Okay, so that's something to look for too, and to know that it's going to change from culture to culture. This was the culture I got on Etsy.
Also, if you look down on the one that's to the left at the bottom right corner of it, you see how some of those beans are still kind of dry? I did have this problem with a couple times, and so if the beans are too dry, the culture can't grow there. So that's one example of that.
From Indonesia, so it is more of a traditional one. So I brought out some more tempeh that from the fridge. So these are 2, and in fact, I just took them out. And one of the things that you can feel too, so I can feel that this got hotter than this one inside of there. And so you can kind of feel that it gets a little fever. That's probably one of the reasons it probably took it up to temperature a little bit more, and that's one of the reasons this probably ripened up a little bit too fast. These are the ones I showed you the other day. One that has a little bit too much dry, and it has a little bit of overripe. This has a little bit of overripe here, but they're still nice. We're going to pasteurize them. So you don't have to pasteurize them. They'll last up to 2 weeks, but at least 4 or 5 days in the fridge without pasteurizing them. Or you could go ahead and just put them in the freezer and not do this step at all. But what we're going to do is just bring the temperature up to 180. So you could do this in your dehydrator. Your oven should go to 180. And we're just going to put it in there for 30 minutes, and that's just going to kill the cultures and stop it from growing. And I guess kill the cultures is a little bit of a wrong thing, but a wrong way to put it. But it will stop it so that it won't get overripe. So this is what it looks like, and it's warm. It's hot to touch a little bit. I mean, you don't really need a pot holder, but I did find the metal got a little bit hot, and this is from 30 minutes at 180 in my oven. If your dehydrator goes that high, you could do that, and that just pasteurizes the tempeh, and it's going to make it last longer. And again, okay, so there's 2 things that you may be going, oh my God, I can't do that, right? You don't want to heat the plastic because you're not a plastic person anyhow. Remember, we have the option of not putting this in plastic bags. You could put it in Pyrex. If you're going to use something over and over again, if you just don't want the waste, you could take little Rubbermaid containers and drill holes in the bottom and the top and use that instead of using stuff that you throw away. You're still using plastic. If plastic is the issue, you can use stainless steel containers. You're just going to want to put them in a water bath. Okay? So, and this was how easy it was. I literally just put it in there, set the timer for 30 minutes. I'm going to let it cool down, and then I'm going to put some in the fridge and some in the freezer.
Oh, it's on the wrong camera. Hey guys. Okay, so that took you through both the soybean and the black bean. And so most of the things are the same, right? And so, except for the dehulling, which I knew there was going to be a big uproar about. So at first, when I was doing this class, I wanted to do the black bean tempeh so people would have a soy-free option. But it's also an easier option. So with thin-skinned beans like Tempeh, black beans, you don't have to remove the hulls. So if you were going to do whole chickpeas, you'd need to remove the hulls. Or you can buy chana dal, which are baby chickpeas that have already been dehulled and split, which is why we skip that completely. And again, that's what this one is. Okay, so this is chana dal, even though we're not really talking about it. See how it's, actually, let me close this for the others. And so you can see there's some little condensations, but then there's these parts of white culture growing, right? And so what I find is that at first it looks like nothing's happening and it's very frustrating, but see how it's easy? I can hold it. It's not just breaking or doing anything like that. It's really sturdy. And that lets me know that more of it is happening on the inside than I can see. And that's very, very nice. So I'm not here to try and make you make soy tempeh. Right? Yeah. Diana said, Joanne says chana dal's for her. And I agree. I can tell you, I did buy a big bag of black soybeans, so I'm looking forward to kind of trying that and seeing if that's more interesting to me. And Joanne asks, so 180 degrees Fahrenheit in plastic is okay? Yeah. It's not hot enough to make it melt or anything like that, so it wasn't like super weird. I know some people have feelings. A lot of people have plastic, so I'm also not telling you you have to do it. But yeah, it didn't do anything. It didn't cook the tempeh. It just brings it up barely enough to where it's going to stop the growth of the culture. So I found it fine. I didn't find that it made anything taste weird. I don't think it didn't make a weird smell. I didn't notice it doing anything. So Brenda, I appreciate your process and knowing what I'm not doing. Now you guys know, though, why I made 2 videos that you can watch separately. Because so the people who can go watch the soy one will watch the soy one. And Jay Peter says, can you please explain, put a stainless steel container in a water bath. So you could have, like, let's say a brownie sized pan that's stainless steel. And this is, I have not made this myself, but this is what I keep coming up again and again and again during my research. So you'd need a bigger pan with some water in it, and then you'd set the pan in top. So what the water in the pan does is it keeps it from drying out, so you don't have to put anything on the top of it. So that's another thing that I'm noticing that people are doing. At this point, I haven't done that yet, but I'm hoping to kind of go that. Just know this too. I find that having quart-size bag, that's about as big right now as I feel comfortable making it, because if you get it bigger, then what could happen is it might not be all knitted together in the middle and some of the edges could start to turn off. I don't think that's going to happen as much in the stainless steel, but I don't know for a fact. Yeah, like a double boiler. Only you just need enough in there, and basically the water is just to keep the tempeh moist, because again, if it dries out too much, then it's not going to culture properly either. Okay, so one of the things I want you to know is, like, and this goes for all the different kinds, when you come in, so at first it's just going to look like, if you're like me, you're going to check it way too much. It won't hurt it, but it's just like, what do you mean nothing's happened in an hour, right? But it starts getting a little bit of condensation, just a wee bit, just tiny. And then a lot of that kind of turns into the white. So at a point on the bag, you can't really tell if it's white or condensation, but then you can feel it if you pick up the bag a little bit, you can tell that it's starting to knit together. Okay? And then you do have to learn your culture. So I know that Joanne was telling me it's topcultures, I think, .com. It's some tempeh culture from Belgium that I have not tried yet. I will try and order some and see if I can give a review on that. I did find the one from Natural Asia did culture much faster. So what happens when it cultures faster, because it builds up an internal temperature. So even though both of those tempehs, those soy tempehs, were at the same temperature in the same Breville dehydrator setting at the same time, they ripened at completely different times. And so I think what it did is, if it ripens faster, then that internal temperature is going to go up faster, which is then going to make it culture even faster. So that's what happened, if that makes sense. So you just might want to keep a handle on it. I have not made my own tempeh starter yet. It seems to be, in reading and researching, it is both easy and hard, so I'm going to try it. It does seem like there could be some, like any kind of cultures, there could be a little bit of health concern, so I may or may not put that out into the world. But to make it, you have to get the tempeh to be overripe. So when it's overripe and it's turning black, it's making spores. So after that, then you have to dry it out and grind it. But you need to have everything sporulated, and then you have to store it properly, and all of your equipment has to be sterile, or you could introduce a bacteria that your body does not like through that. So it's still, compared to buying tempeh in the store, so I think Light Life tempeh is one of the cheapest, and probably get a rectangle about like that for $3-ish. So, you know, I think it still is cheaper to make your own. I have tons and tons and tons of heirloom beans. So I'm probably going to be making a bunch of different heirloom beans and testing that out. I'm actually saving some of my soybeans because I want to make tofu. And I'm curious if you guys would be interested in a tofu class, because there was this tofu I used to have in New Orleans that actually had like French herbs, and I was thinking, ooh, you could put chilies or mushrooms maybe. I don't know. I'm in experimental Kathy phase of life. So if you guys are interested in a tofu class, I'll probably put something in Kathy's Club and out on Vegan Recipes Cooking with Kathy Hester as well. Once again, in case you missed the book that I showed a couple times already, it's a great book. The part on tempeh is short, but I did order some koji to do some other experimentations. They've got recipes for miso and soyu and all kinds of yummy things in here. But this tempeh information was amazing, and it's a great resource. So if you don't have the book, I encourage you to get it. They do have it on a Kindle format as well as a hardback. And Joanne says the tempeh culture from Europe has fantastic reviews. And Jay Peters says, can you use stainless steel rectangle colander with saran wrap hold over to culture if trying to avoid plastic? Here's and when you're saying a rectangle colander, you're kind of talking about a colander like this that maybe doesn't have rounded ends. I would think you would be able to do that. Here would be the thing. Because there's so many more holes, I think you're still going to have a pan of water in there. So you might want to have a pan of water maybe like at the bottom layer, and then up here, maybe right above it, put your colander if it fits. And I mean, obviously it doesn't have to be a Breville, it could be your dehydrator or whatever. Those are what I've seen mostly are like hot plate pans that people were using. And Marilyn and Brenda are interested in tofu. And I think with the, I still haven't made tofu yet, so I got a little to get ahead on. But it does appear that we make soy milk and then make that. So that means we wouldn't be worrying as much about hulling and things like that. So, and also on that class, we can make the chickpea tempeh, which is not tempeh made with not tofu made with smashed chickpea milk the way soy milk is, but they actually use chickpea flour, and it's but it would be at least a non-soy option for those of you who can't have soy. And Marilyn says she has the soy Bella. I do too, and it's still in the box. And Cindy thinks the tofu class sounds good. Do you guys have any other questions? I'm going to kind of give you a few more minutes. I know this format is a little different, but you get out of class earlier, so now you can make tempeh. So that's kind of good. And I'm thinking of classes for next month, so if you have some ideas, feel free to either email me at kathyhester@gmail.com or put them in the free private Facebook group, Vegan Recipes Cooking with Kathy Hester. If you're not already a member, just when you go in, just say, I took a class, and I'll let you in. I'm thinking of maybe doing sushi and rice balls as one of them. And then we were also talking about maybe doing a dehydrator class at some point. So I'd probably do a tofu class 1 month and a dehydrator class. And I would really be interested in feedback on how you guys felt about having this class be part pre-recorded video and part live video, because that's also going to tell me a lot about what I can and can't do in the future. I think I tried to be there and available for questions, so hopefully you didn't feel like you were just watching a film all by yourself. But if you have some feedback and constructive criticism, please do send it to kathyhester@gmail.com. And I'm seeing some here. Brenda liked the class format, feature film with my narration. That sounds like a nightmare, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. And Marilyn said it was a very interesting class, enjoyed it and learned a lot. Okay, great. Because the thing is if we can do some things like this, I can just really stretch what we can do in a 2-hour to 3-hour time frame. Because I would have hated to have this class be like 4 days long, right? Because you are going to, and even in this class, you did get to see some things repeated, but that was a little bit on purpose. You saw it repeated not a bazillion times. But I definitely want to see pictures of your tempeh. Please send me pictures of your tempeh when you make it. And if you have some questions, I will do my best to answer it. When you're making your first batch of tempeh, make sure that you're noticing what the temperatures are and things like that. You want it to be around, and I'll write up a little check sheet for you guys. So like what you want to make sure you have, what you're looking for, and when you think you know it'll be done, and how you can pasteurize or extend the life of it. I'll just make a little printable. And let's see. Kiki says, I love the hybrid class. Okay, good. I was so nervous you guys wouldn't like it. Joanne knows I get super nervous about anything new is not my friend, which is weird considering that I'll make anything, right? I'll make any kind of food. I'll just jump off a cliff with it. I just don't like to, bother you guys with something bad. So do you like the format? Cindy liked the format. Okay, awesome. Oh, you guys have made my day now. I'm so easy. So I'll get that printable printed out, and that's something that maybe you guys could download and print out and just use as a checklist and put times down that you check things on and temperatures. And that might be a good thing for you to refer back to. And I'll get that up for you. That is going to go on the class, which is at kathyhester.podia.com. So if you go there and it says, you need to buy the tempeh class, and you're like, I bought that tempeh class, go and make sure you're logged in, because you're probably not. I think it logs you out automatically at some point, and that seems to be an issue. So when you navigate to the tempeh class, I will upload some videos. I'm going to upload this whole video plus the 2 videos I pieced together, and then I'll also get that printable together for you. Okay? And you guys have a wonderful day, and make some tempeh, even if it's with canned black beans. Because seriously, if you make tempeh the lazy way, you're still super awesome. I'll take being super awesome for a day. I can use all the boost I can get. Okay, great. Okay, you guys have a wonderful, wonderful week, and I will be putting up July classes soon.